My sister humiliated me in front of our entire family at the airport, laughing at my cheap ticket. She thought my life was a failure. She didn't know my ticket was a cover, and that a single, quiet phrase from a man in uniform would expose her arrogance to everyone. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The air in the terminal was thick with the scent of recycled air and stale coffee, a familiar perfume that usually brought me a strange sense of comfort. It was the smell of transit, of missions starting and ending. But today, it was laced with the cloying sweetness of my sister, Chloe's expensive perfume, a scent that seemed to announce her presence before she even spoke. We were at the gate, waiting to board a flight to Italy for our parents' 30th wedding anniversary, a trip my father had been planning for years. For them, it was a dream. For me, it was becoming a masterclass in patience. I was bone tired. The last assignment had been a grueling 72-hour whirlwind across 3 continents, ending just this morning. I hadn't had more than a few hours of sleep, and the institutional gray of the airport carpet seemed to be swimming before my eyes. All I wanted was to board the plane, sink into a seat, any seat, and let the engine's drone lull me into oblivion. Chloe, of course, was anything but tired. She was electric, buzzing with a self-generated energy that seemed to feed on the attention of others. Dressed in a cream-colored lounge set that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, she was curating her experience for her followers. Every few minutes, her phone would emerge for a perfectly angled selfie with her designer luggage or a shot of her boarding pass artfully placed next to a Starbucks cup. "Oh, Ellie, let me see your ticket again," she said, her voice dripping with a faux sweetness that set my teeth on edge. She leaned over, her perfectly straightened hair tickling my cheek. I held it up without comment. It was a simple, no-frills printout. ELEANORVANCE, Seat 34B Economy. Chloe let out a little laugh, a tinkling sound that was meant to sound like amusement but landed like a shard of glass. 34B, you're practically sitting on the tail. Are you sure you'll even get a complimentary beverage back there? She turned to our parents, who were sitting opposite us, and raised her voice just enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. I just can't believe my big sister, the government hotshot, is flying all the way to Rome in the cheap seats. My mother offered a weak, placating smile. Now, Chloe, it's not about the seat, it's about us all being together. I know, Mom, I know, Chloe said, waving a dismissive hand. She held up her own ticket, a glossy, business-class pass she'd received as part of a brand deal. It's just, I work so hard to create this beautiful, aspirational life. I just want my family to enjoy the finer things, too. Ellie, you have that important job with the State Department. Don't they take care of you? The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. My job, the thing I could never, ever talk about. To my family, I was a mid-level administrative assistant, a glorified clerk who shuffled papers in a gray cubicle. It was a cover story we had all agreed upon years ago for security reasons, but Chloe had long since stopped seeing the cover part. She simply believed it. To her, I was a boring, underachieving bureaucrat, a stark contrast to her vibrant, self-made success as a social media influencer. My job is fine, Chloe, I said, my voice flatter than I intended. The ticket gets me there, that's all that matters. If you say so, she chirped, turning her attention back to her phone. She began typing furiously. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a notification. She had tagged me in an Instagram story. I didn't have to look to know what it was. A picture of her gleaming business class ticket next to my crumpled economy one with a caption like, "Sisterly love, even when we're in different worlds. Business class economy family travel." The heat rose in my cheeks. It wasn't just teasing. It was a public declaration of my perceived status, a calculated bit of content designed to elevate her by diminishing me. Our parents looked uncomfortable but said nothing. They had long ago given up trying to mediate Chloe's behavior, treating it as an eccentricity of her online-focused generation. But I saw it for what it was, a deliberate, casual cruelty. She wasn't just my sister. She was my antagonist, and her arena was the court of public opinion, even if that public was just the bored travelers at Gate C26. I leaned my head back against the hard plastic chair and closed my eyes, trying to block it all out. The exhaustion was a heavy blank. And underneath it, a familiar ache settled in my chest. It was the loneliness of a double life, of being unable to defend myself or share the truth with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Her laughter echoed louder than the airport announcements, but it wasn't the public shame that hurt. It was the confirmation that to my own sister, I was nothing more than a punchline. The immediate aftermath of Chloe's Instagram post was a thick, uncomfortable silence. My father rustled his newspaper with unnecessary force, while my mother suddenly became intensely interested in the contents of her handbag. They were masters of avoidance, skilled at navigating around Chloe's provocations as if they were pieces of furniture in a dark room. Their silence was meant to be peacekeeping, but it felt like acquiescence. It told me that this was my battle to fight, or more accurately, my humiliation to endure alone. I took a slow, deep breath, trying to anchor myself. In my line of work, emotional regulation wasn't just a skill, it was a survival mechanism. Panicking could compromise a mission. Reacting emotionally could put people at risk. So, I did what I was trained to do. I compartmentalized. I mentally filed the sting of Chloe's mockery away in a lead-lined box labeled Family Issues and focused on the operational details of the present moment. The flight number, the scheduled departure time, the layout of the terminal. Chloe, however, was not finished. Having received a flurry of validation from her online followers, laughing emojis and comments like, "OMG, you're savage," she was emboldened. She leaned forward, her voice once again carrying through the waiting area. "Don't worry, Ellie," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I'll save you a bread roll from my gourmet meal. I hear the food in the back is basically just salted cardboard." She winked at my father, as if letting him in on a hilarious joke. He offered a tight, non-committal smile in return. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. I saw the desperate need for validation in her eyes, the insecurity that fueled her constant need to project an image of effortless superiority. She wasn't just being mean, she was reinforcing her own fragile identity. My quiet, unassuming existence was an affront to the brand she had so carefully constructed. If I wasn't visibly successful in the ways she understood, money, luxury, public recognition, then I had to be a failure. And she needed to make sure everyone knew it. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and even, "I prefer to eat before I fly. It's better for jet lag." It was a simple, factual statement, but to Chloe, it sounded like a challenge to her narrative. Her smile tightened. "Right, of course. Well, when you're done with your pre-flight granola bar, let me know. I'll be sipping champagne and enjoying actual legroom." She turned away, decisively ending the conversation and dismissing me completely. She pulled out her noise-canceling headphones, a clear sign that she was now inhabiting a world far too glamorous for the likes of me. As she scrolled through her phone, a smug little smile played on her lips. She was triumphant. I felt a familiar wave of resignation wash over me. For years, it had been like this. Every family gathering, every holiday, was a stage for Chloe to perform her success and my supposed mediocrity. I had let her do it because arguing was pointless. Explaining the truth was impossible. My silence had become my only shield. But today felt different. Maybe it was the exhaustion wearing down my defenses, or maybe it was the public nature of the humiliation. A quiet resolve began to form in my chest. I wouldn't fight her on her terms. I wouldn't stoop to her level. I would simply let the truth play out. She had built this entire narrative on a foundation of assumptions, and a foundation like that was bound to crumble. She just didn't know it yet. I glanced at the large clock on the terminal wall. 14:30. My instructions were clear. An agent will make contact at the departure gate no later than 30 minutes prior to scheduled departure. It was a standard protocol for this kind of travel, a quiet check-in to ensure everything was secure. It was usually a discreet, blink-and-you'll-miss-it affair. A man in a suit would ask for the time, I'd give a coded reply, and we'd both move on. Today, however, I had a feeling it might not be so discreet. And as I looked at my sister, so blissfully absorbed in her world of filters and likes, a single thought echoed in my mind, a quiet mantra of anticipation. She thinks she knows everything. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. She had forgotten that in the real world, unlike the curated reality of her social media feed, appearances can be deceiving. Sitting there at the gate, under the fluorescent hum of the airport lights, the years seemed to collapse on themselves. I was no longer a 28-year-old woman with a top secret clearance, but a teenager again, watching my little sister navigate the world with a confidence I could never muster. Chloe had always been the star of our family. She was effervescent and charming, the kind of person who could walk into a room and command its attention without even trying. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the shadow that made her light seem even brighter. I remembered when she first decided she wanted to be a photographer. She was 16 and had her heart set on a professional-grade camera that was far beyond my parents' budget. I had just finished a grueling summer internship, saving every penny for a down payment on a reliable used car. I'll never forget the look on her face when she saw the camera on the store shelf, a mixture of longing and hopeless desire. 2 days later, my savings account was empty, and the camera was in her hands. She'd squealed with delight and promised she would pay me back someday. She never did. I never asked her to. Seeing her happy was enough. That camera was the genesis of her influencer career. She had a natural eye, a talent for making the mundane look magical. Her photos gained traction, and soon, brands came calling. The free clothes turned into free trips, which turned into lucrative contracts. Her success was meteoric, and we were all proud of her. But somewhere along the way, her gratitude had curdled into a sense of entitlement. The world had told her she was special, and she believed it. In her worldview, success was quantifiable. It was measured in follower counts, brand partnerships, and the class of your airline ticket. My life, by contrast, was an enigma. My government job was, in her eyes, the very definition of uninspired. State Department sounded impressive in the abstract, but the reality she imagined for me was one of beige cubicles, bad coffee, and a paycheck that barely covered the rent on my modest apartment. She couldn't comprehend a life where fulfillment wasn't tied to public acclaim or material wealth. Her condescension had started as gentle teasing, but had sharpened over the years into a genuine, dismissive pity. She would make pointed comments at family dinners, couched as well-meaning advice. "Ellie, you should really let me help you with your wardrobe. In your line of work, you have to project confidence," she'd say, eyeing my practical, understated clothes with disdain. Or, "Are you saving for retirement? I know those government pensions aren't what they used to be. I could connect you with my financial advisor." Each comment was a small cut, a reminder of the vast gulf she perceived between our lives. She saw my practicality as a lack of ambition, my discretion as a lack of personality, my secrecy as a lack of anything interesting to say. She had constructed a narrative of my life that was convenient for her, one that cast me as the sensible, slightly tragic older sister who provided the perfect backdrop for her own dazzling success. And today, at this gate, she was putting on her master performance. She wasn't just my sister, she was Chloe Monet, the brand. Her appearance was flawless, her makeup expertly applied to look natural, her hair shining under the harsh airport lighting. The expensive lounge set was chosen for its aesthetic of casual luxury, a look that said, "I travel so often, I need comfortable yet chic attire." It was all part of the illusion, the carefully curated image of a life lived without compromise. As she laughed with our parents, showing them a video on her phone, I noticed her eyes flicking towards me, checking to see if I was watching, if I was properly appreciating the show. That was the core of it all. It wasn't enough for her to succeed. She needed an audience, and more than that, she needed me to be a part of that audience, a permanent fixture in the front row, validating her choices by embodying the alternative she had so decisively rejected. The polite, boring, and above all, ordinary life. A voice on the intercom announced the pre-boarding for families with small children and passengers requiring special assistance. The announcement jolted me back to the present. The clock on the wall now read 14:45, 15 minutes to departure. My heart gave a little flutter of anticipation. The show was about to begin, and for the first time, I wasn't going to be in the audience. "Well, that's my cue," Chloe announced, standing up and stretching languidly, ensuring everyone nearby could see the designer logo on her sweatshirt. The airline attendant had just called for business-class passengers to begin boarding. Chloe gave our parents air kisses, then turned to me with a look of theatrical pity. "Try not to get stuck behind someone who reclines their seat the whole way. See you in Rome, Ellie." She turned and sauntered towards the boarding lane, her designer carry-on gliding silently behind her. She flashed her glossy ticket at the gate agent with a dazzling smile, a queen ascending. To her throne. As she disappeared down the jet bridge, I felt my parents' gazes on me. There was a quiet sympathy in their eyes, the kind reserved for a child who had just lost a game. This was the turning point. In that moment, watching Chloe's triumphant exit, a profound sense of calm settled over me. The hurt and frustration that had been simmering just beneath the surface evaporated, replaced by a cool, clear resolve. I could have said something. I could have whispered a small piece of the truth to my parents, something to salvage my own dignity. But words were clumsy. They could be argued with, dismissed, or disbelieved. What was coming couldn't be. My decision was made. I would do nothing. I would say nothing. I would simply let protocol run its course. My inaction became my strategy. The clever trap, if you could call it that, wasn't something I had to set. It was a mechanism already in motion, a series of events dictated by the necessities of my real job. All I had to do was allow Chloe to walk into it. She had spent the entire day building a stage and a narrative of her own superiority. I was simply going to let a spotlight of reality shine down upon it. My internal investigation began, a mental checklist I ran through out of habit. I scanned the faces in the crowd, a routine scan for anyone paying undue attention to me or my family. Old habits die hard. The area was clear. I noted the positions of the gate agents, the security cameras, the exits. I timed my breathing, slowing my heart rate, a technique used to maintain focus under pressure. I glanced at the clock again. 14:50, he was late. A flicker of doubt entered my mind. What if there was a change in plans? What if the contact wasn't coming? The whole system was built on precision and timing. A deviation could mean anything. My mind raced through the possibilities, none of them good. For a second, I felt a pang of genuine fear, not for my pride, but for the mission. The contents of my carry-on bag were far more valuable than Chloe's entire collection of designer goods. My mother must have sensed my sudden tension. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Fine, Mom, just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. And then I saw him. He moved with a quiet purpose that distinguished him from the aimless shuffle of other travelers. He was a man in his 40s, with a neat haircut and an impeccably tailored dark suit that failed to completely conceal the athletic build beneath it. He wasn't wearing a uniform in the traditional sense, but he radiated an aura of authority that was more potent than any badge. An earpiece was curled discreetly into one ear. He wasn't looking for me, not yet. He was surveying the area, his gaze professional and assessing. He was diplomatic security. He was my contact. He exchanged a brief, almost imperceptible nod with one of the airport security officers standing near the gate, a silent acknowledgement of professional courtesy. Then, his eyes began to sweep the crowd in our section. I held my breath. This was it. The tumblers of the lock were clicking into place. The quiet, boring life of a leaner Vance was about to be officially interrupted. The man's eyes met mine. There was a flicker of recognition. He had found his target. He started walking towards us. The agent moved with an unhurried grace that was somehow more intimidating than overt aggression. He navigated the cluttered space around the gate seats without breaking stride, his path a straight, unwavering line directly towards our little family cluster. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father lower his newspaper. His curiosity piqued. My mother watched the man's approach with a polite, questioning look. He stopped directly in front of me, his posture formal and erect. He ignored my parents completely, his focus entirely on me. His expression was neutral, professional, and utterly unreadable. "Ms. Vance?" he asked, his voice low but clear, cutting through the general airport noise. "Eleanor Vance." The use of my full name was a jolt. In our family, I was Ellie or Eleanor. Ms. Vance was a different person, a person who existed in secure government buildings and on official documents. It was the name of the woman who did my job. "Yes," I said, my own voice steady. My mother looked from the agent to me, her brow wrinkling in confusion. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" she asked, her maternal instinct kicking in. "Is our daughter in some kind of trouble?" The agent didn't even glance at her. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "It's time," he said simply. "Please come with me." It wasn't a request. It was a quiet, polite command. This was the first major reveal, the moment the curtain was pulled back just enough to show that the stage wasn't what it seemed. The confrontation was not with me, but with my family's perception of me. And from the looks on their faces, it was a deeply confusing one. I stood up, grabbing the handle of my plain, unassuming carry-on. "Where are you taking her?" my father asked, his voice taking on a protective edge. He stood up as well, a gesture of paternal solidarity. For the first time, the agent acknowledged him with a brief, dismissive glance. "That's on a need-to-know basis, sir. Your daughter knows the protocol." He then turned back to me. "We need to pre-board you now." The word pre-board hung in the air. The pre-boarding for business class was already done. Chloe was gone. The only people left to board were the general masses in economy. His statement made no sense in the context of commercial air travel. This was the moment Chloe should have witnessed, but in a way, her absence made it even more potent. This wasn't for her benefit, it was a matter of professional necessity. The agent motioned towards the jet bridge. I gave my parents a quick, reassuring look. "It's okay," I said softly. "It's work stuff. I'll explain later." Their faces were a canvas of bewilderment. Work stuff. What kind of work stuff involved being personally escorted onto a plane by a serious man in a suit? My boring job as a paper pusher suddenly had a new, inexplicable dimension. As I followed the agent toward the gate agent's podium, I could feel the eyes of the other passengers on me. The scene was unusual enough to draw attention. People were wondering the same thing as my parents. Was I a celebrity, a VIP, or was I in trouble? The ambiguity was the point. Discretion and misdirection were tools of my trade. The agent spoke briefly to the woman at the desk, showing her a credential from his wallet. Her eyes widened slightly. She nodded, typed something quickly into her computer, and then picked up the microphone for the intercom. The confrontation was about to have its public confirmation, a final, undeniable seal of legitimacy that would shatter my family's comfortable assumptions about me forever. As the diplomatic security agent led me past the podium, I could hear my parents talking in hushed, urgent tones behind me. My father sounded confused, my mother worried. Their world, with its clearly defined roles for their two daughters, had just been tilted on its axis. They were trying to make sense of the scene, to fit it into a narrative they could understand. I could almost hear them thinking, maybe it's a mistake, maybe he has the wrong person. Their minds were scrambling for a logical explanation, and "our quiet daughter has a top-secret job" was not on their list of possibilities. Their confusion was the direct result of Chloe's long-running campaign. She had so effectively built the case for my mediocrity that any evidence to the contrary seemed impossible. Her version of my life, dull, uneventful, and safe, was the one they had unconsciously accepted. This sudden, official intervention was an anomaly they couldn't process. Just as the agent and I reached the entrance to the jet bridge, the gate agent's voice crackled over the PA system, sharp and clear, silencing the ambient chatter of the waiting area. "Good afternoon, passengers of Flight AZ609 to Rome. We will be commencing with our general boarding shortly," she announced. Then she added a line that was most certainly not in the standard airline script. "We would like to thank Ms. Eleanor Vance for her cooperation with federal protocol. We appreciate your patience." The words echoed through the terminal. Ms. Eleanor Vance, Federal Protocol. It was irrefutable. It was public. It was the second and more powerful piece of proof. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a private matter. This was official business, announced to a gate full of people. From my position, I couldn't see my parents' faces, but I could imagine their expressions. Stunned silence, wide eyes, the slow, dawning realization that they did not know their own daughter at all. The case that Chloe had so carefully constructed for years, the one where I was the boring, unsuccessful sister, had just had its foundation dynamited. This public announcement was the irrefutable evidence that contradicted her entire thesis. The agent didn't even flinch at the announcement. To him, it was just procedure. To my family, it was a revelation. As we walked down the sterile, carpeted tube of the jet bridge, the agent spoke for the first time since his initial approach. "Sorry if that caused any disruption with your family," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "We had a potential flag on the manifest. Standard procedure is to ensure asset integrity before general boarding." "Understood," I replied. "Everything secure." "All clear," he confirmed. "Your designated seat is clear. The flight crew is briefed. You'll be the first on, last off." We stepped onto the plane into the quiet, still cabin. The flight attendants greeted us with polite, knowing smiles. They had clearly been informed. The agent walked me down the empty aisle, past the plush, empty seats of business class where Chloe was likely already settled in, perhaps with her champagne, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding back at the gate. He led me to my seat, 34B, the exact seat Chloe had mocked. An economy seat, yes, but not just any seat. I was in an exit row with extra legroom, and seat 34A, the one next to the window, was empty. It would remain empty for the entire flight, a quiet buffer of security. Seat 34C on the aisle was occupied by another agent, a woman dressed as a tourist, reading a paperback novel. My cheap seat was, in fact, the center of a carefully coordinated security arrangement. The agent gave me a short nod. "Have a safe flight, Ms. Vance." "You too," I said. He turned and walked back towards the front of the plane, his job done. I stowed my carry-on, the asset, under the seat in front of me and sat down. I leaned my head back, the exhaustion returning, but this time it was mixed with a sense of profound relief. The truth, or at least a glimpse of it, was out. The spell of Chloe's narrative was broken. The real confrontation, the one with my sister, was yet to come. But now, when it happened, I wouldn't be the one on the defensive. The plane was at cruising altitude, a gentle hum filling the cabin as the flight attendants began their dinner service. I had politely declined a meal, my mind too preoccupied to even think about food. My parents had boarded with the rest of the economy passengers, filing past my row with wide, questioning eyes. My father gave me a look that was a mixture of confusion and a newfound respect. My mother just looked worried. I gave them both a small, reassuring nod, but we all knew a proper conversation would have to wait until we were on the ground. About an hour into the flight, a figure appeared at the start of the economy aisle, silhouetted against the curtains separating us from business class. It was Chloe. She moved with a jerky, uncertain energy that was completely at odds with her usual confident glide. Her face, stripped of its earlier smugness, was pale and tense. She clutched the tops of the seats as she made her way down the aisle, her eyes locked on me. She arrived at my row and stood there, hovering. The tourist lady agent in 34C didn't even look up from her book. "Ellie," Chloe whispered, her voice tight and strained. "What was that? Back at the gate. Who was that man? What is going on?" This was it, the showdown, not in a public square, but in the cramped, semi-public space of an airplane cabin at 30,000 feet. The setting was perfect. There was nowhere for her to run, no audience to perform for, no way to spin this for her followers. It was just the two of us, surrounded by the white noise of the engines. I looked up at her, my expression calm. I didn't feel anger or triumph, just a profound sense of weariness and a need to finally close the distance that had grown between us. "That was my security detail, Chloe." I said quietly, my voice just loud enough for her to hear. She blinked, the words not quite registering. Your what? Your security? What are you talking about? You work in an office. You file paperwork. That's my cover story, I said, finally uttering the words I had held back for so long. It's what I have to tell people. It's what I had to tell you. Her face cycled through a series of emotions, disbelief, confusion, and then a flicker of dawning comprehension. Cover story for what? She breathed, her voice barely audible. My real job, I explained, keeping my voice low and even. I'm a diplomatic courier. My job is to securely transport classified and sensitive diplomatic materials across international borders. The bag under my seat right now contains documents that are critical to national security. I gestured with my head. The woman next to me is a field agent. The man who escorted me onto the plane is from the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. My economy ticket is for maintaining a low profile. The empty seat next to me is for security. It's all part of a protocol to protect the asset, me and what I'm carrying. I laid it all out in simple, factual statements. No emotion, no embellishment, just the plain, unvarnished truth. I watched as each sentence landed, dismantling the world she thought she knew. Her narrative of my boring, insignificant life was being systematically erased, replaced by a reality that was stranger and more serious than she could have ever imagined. Chloe stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. All the arrogance, all the condescending pity had drained from her face, leaving behind a raw, vulnerable bewilderment. You transport secret documents, she stammered. Sometimes, I said. Among other things, it's why I'm tired all the time. It's why I can't talk about my work. It's why I don't own a lot of flashy things. My life requires discretion, Chloe. It requires me to be invisible. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't sadness, but the overwhelming shock of realization. The whole world, as she had defined it, had been wrong. Her entire system of value, based on visibility, luxury, and public acclaim, was meaningless in the face of what I was telling her. While she had been chasing likes and curating a perfect image, I had been living a life of actual substance and consequence, hidden in plain sight. So when I was at the gate, she whispered, her voice cracking, when I was making fun of your ticket, you were on a mission. I'm always on a mission, I said softly. The words hung between us. Her public humiliation of me was suddenly cast in a new, horrifying light. She hadn't been punching down at her failed sister. She had been mocking a federal officer in the middle of a sensitive operation. The color drained completely from her face as the full weight of her ignorance, her arrogance, finally crashed down upon her. She sank into the empty seat beside me, her head in her hands, and for the first time in years, my sister was utterly and completely speechless. Chloe sat beside me in seat 34A for the remainder of the flight. She didn't cry or speak. She just stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, lost in a sea of thoughts I could only imagine. The flight attendants left her alone, perhaps sensing the gravity of the moment, or perhaps because the agent in 34C gave them a subtle signal to do so. For Chloe, the downfall wasn't a public shaming, but a quiet, internal collapse. The luxury of her business class seat, which she had championed as the ultimate symbol of her success, now sat empty at the front of the plane, a hollow monument to her superficial values. When the plane landed in Rome, we deplaned as instructed last. The security agent from the aisle seat escorted us off the aircraft and through a private customs channel, bypassing the long lines and crowded halls. My parents, who had been waiting anxiously just outside the gate, rushed towards us. My mother hugged me tightly, her face etched with a million questions. Chloe, however, pulled away. I need a minute, she mumbled, and walked over to a quiet corner, her shoulders slumped. That evening, at the hotel, I found her sitting on the balcony of her room, overlooking the ancient city. She had a cup of tea in her hands, but she hadn't touched it. The usual glow from her phone was absent. Hey, I said softly, stepping out to join her. She didn't look at me. All those years, she said, her voice thick with emotion. All the jokes I made. The things I said about your clothes, your apartment, your life, I was so awful. You didn't know, I said. It was the simplest, kindest truth. That's not an excuse, she replied, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I didn't want to know. I built this whole story in my head about who you were because it made me feel better about myself. If you were the boring, responsible one, then I could be the exciting, successful one. I needed you to be small so I could feel big. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. The confession was a balm on wounds I hadn't even realized were still so deep. I'm so sorry, Ellie, she whispered, and this time the tears fell freely. I'm so incredibly sorry. I sat down next to her, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I put my arm around my little sister. She leaned into me, and we sat in silence for a long time, watching the sunset paint the Roman sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beginning. The rest of the trip was different. The change in Chloe was palpable. She was quieter, more observant, more thoughtful. She asked me questions about my life, not about the secret parts, but about me. What I liked to read, what I did on my rare days off, what I hoped for the future. She saw me not as a character in her story, but as a person. Our parents, after a long and carefully worded explanation from me about the nature of my work, treated me with a new kind of awe and understanding. The vindication I felt wasn't a smug satisfaction of having won. It was the profound peace of being seen. The antagonist in my story wasn't really Chloe. It was the wall of secrets and misunderstandings between us. And now, that wall was gone. Justice was served not by her punishment, but by her transformation. On our last night in Rome, as we walked near the Trevi fountain, Chloe turned to me. You know, she said with a small smile, I think for my next series of posts, I'm going to focus on things that are a little more real. I smiled back. I'd like that, I said. We walked through the ancient streets, two sisters, no longer in different worlds, but finally on the same path together.